Welcome to Movie Bites. Today, I am going to explain the comedy, drama, fantasy film called The Truman Show. Spoilers ahead. Truman Burbank is an insurance salesman that lives on Sea Haven Island with his wife Meryl, who's a nurse. One day, after getting ready for work and greeting his neighbors with his traditional greeting of, "Good morning. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening and good night," a mysterious object falls out of the sky and lands near his car. When Truman looks up, the sky is clear and offers no explanation for where the object came from. However, it's clear the object is a studio light. As he drives to work, the radio reports an aircraft that flew over Sea Haven shedding parts, which makes Truman believe that this was the source of the mysterious object. At work, Truman makes a call asking for directory information to Fiji and then asks for someone with the name Lauren or Sylvia Garland. When the search yields no results, he hangs up the phone just as his boss, Lawrence, approaches his desk and asks him to close a deal on Harbor Island. Truman heads to the pier but is forced to return home, after his fear of open water gets to him. Later, Truman goes to visit his lifelong best friend, Marlin, where he shares his dreams about quitting his job, leaving Sea Haven and traveling to Fiji. That evening, Truman sits alone on the beach looking out toward the sea. He remembers a boating accident, where he lost his father during a storm when they were at sea. His father wanted to go back to shore but reluctantly stayed because of Truman. When the storm hit, Truman's father was swept overboard and drowned. As Truman comes out of the memory, it begins to rain. But just on Truman. He stands up in shock, at which point the clouds open up in a downpour, pushing Truman to return home. He tells Meryl about his plan to go to Fiji and then explore the world, but she dismisses the idea, saying that they have financial obligations and that they should try for a baby, as that's an adventure in itself. The next day on his way to work, Truman spots a homeless man on the street that looks like his father. He rushes to speak to the man, at which point, several strangers surround the man and take him away before he can get to him. Truman shares the experience with his mother, to which she says it's just his imagination and that his father is dead. That night, Truman goes down to the basement to rummage through a big trunk of his old things. When he finds a red sweater that says "How will it end?" on it. His memories take him back to his college days, where he and Marlin were in the homecoming band. Across the courtyard, Truman sees a beautiful woman but is distracted when Meryl shows up. Throughout the next few weeks, Meryl and Truman are inseparable, apart from one day when Truman is studying late in the library. He sees the beautiful woman again and learns her name is Lauren, who says that she isn't allowed to speak to him. Truman asks her out for some time in the future, to which she writes on a piece of paper and gives to Truman the word "now." The cameras lose them for a second but another one catches them as they run out of a nearby exit. Truman and Lauren run towards the beach, where they get a moment of privacy. Within seconds, a vehicle approaches and Lauren becomes frantic. She tells Truman that her real name is Sylvia Garland and is just about to tell him the truth about the show, when a man who claims to be her father pulls his car onto the beach. Lauren manages to tell Truman that everything around him is fake and part of a TV show. The man says that Lauren is delusional and tells Truman that they are moving to Fiji. Then they drive away, leaving Truman with the red sweater that Lauren left behind. As Truman returns to reality, he takes the scraps of magazines he has been tearing out at work and reveals he's been compiling together a collage of Sylvia's face. The next day, whilst Truman is on his way to work, the radio oddly reports every movement he makes, which are actually remarks from crew members that are watching him. The radio starts playing music again and the reporter apologizes, saying that they picked up a police frequency. Paranoid and panicked, Truman parks and dashes into a nearby building. He walks towards the lift and as the doors open, instead of seeing an empty lift, he sees what looks like a TV set break room, with people wearing headphones and eating sandwiches. Before he can work out what he just saw, the building's security grabs him and throws him out for trespassing. Not sure what's going on, Truman sees Marlin's service vehicle parked and goes to explain to Marlin what just happened. He shrugs off Truman's remarks, thinking he's just trying to be funny. Truman then pulls Marlin aside and tells him that he's going to be going away for a while. When Truman returns home, he finds his wife and his mother looking through old photos together. They show him the photos and the TV begins to play a film called Show Me the Way to Go Home, an attempt to dissuade Truman from leaving. When taking a closer look at the old photos, he comes across a photo of his wedding, where after closer inspection, he sees Meryl crossing her fingers, meaning she didn't marry Truman truthfully. The next day, Truman goes to a travel agency to book a flight to Fiji, but the travel agent tells him that there are no flights for another month. Truman decides he will leave Sea Haven by bus and goes to the bus station. He gets on the bus to Chicago, which mysteriously breaks down before it can leave the station. Meryl comes home from work and finds Truman sitting in his car in the driveway. She gets into the car and sits with him, but he tells her to be quiet and look at the rearview mirror, where he accurately predicts the movements of every person on his street. Specifically, a lady on a bike, a man with flowers, and a vintage Volkswagen Beetle. Meryl tells Truman that she's worried about him and brushes off his remarks. As Meryl turns to leave, Truman locks the car doors and starts to drive around spontaneously in an attempt to prove his theory right. He starts by driving towards the only bridge off of Seahaven Island, but stops just short of it. His fear of open water takes over and he can't bring himself to drive across. Instead, he closes his eyes and slams his foot on the accelerator, forcing Meryl to turn the wheel so they don't crash. They cross the bridge and pass a sign saying forest fires ahead, but Truman keeps on going. Eventually, the car is stopped outside a power plant that seems to be in meltdown. There are police and men in hazmat suits blocking the road. A police officer approaches the car and orders him to retreat, but accidentally uses Truman's first name, despite having never met him before. Truman jumps out of the car and tries to make a run for it, but the men in the hazmat suits make chase and they capture him and return him to the island. Once Truman gets home, Meryl tries to make him feel better by offering a new drink she picked up at the store. However, she's promoting it like a TV commercial, which makes Truman more paranoid. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door and it's Marlon, who takes Truman out for a beer. Marlon assures Truman that everyone is not conspiring against him, and if they were, then he'd also be in on it too. He tells Truman that the last thing he'd ever do is to lie to his best friend. In reality, Christoph, the creator, is telling him what to say through an earpiece. Marlon then tells Truman the real reason he came by and took him out tonight, and a man appears from the mist. As the man approaches, Truman can see that it's the homeless man he'd seen, who is actually in fact, his father. The two hug and Truman's dad apologizes, saying he will make up for all the time they lost. Christoph instructs the crew to get a cinematic shot of the embrace, and revels in his master shot of Truman crying. It's now revealed that Truman is the star of the most popular live reality TV show in history, called The Truman Show. And Seahaven Island is an enormous TV set, within a huge dome that mimics the weather, as well as day and night. The show is run by hundreds of staff members, all under the command of the director, Christoph. In an interview on a weekly TV show called True Talk, Christoph is being interviewed, and explains that the reason for killing off Truman's father was to instill a fear of water in Truman, so that he wouldn't want to leave the island. On the show, callers ring up and ask questions. A caller rings and it's Sylvia, who criticizes Christoph for imprisoning Truman in a fake world. Christoph counters by saying that real life is the actual prison, and Truman has been given the chance to lead a normal life, in a world without violence where he is safe. He goes on to say that if Truman discovers the truth about his reality, he will be free to leave. The next day, Truman seems to have gone back to his normal self. He greets his neighbors the same way he does every morning, and heads off to work, where he meets a new coworker named Vivian. She is appointed as Truman's new prospective partner, as Meryl left him due to his paranoia. That evening, Truman falls asleep on a makeshift bed in his basement after organizing things. After a few hours of inactivity, Christoph gets worried, and asks the crew to ring Truman's phone, but he doesn't answer, nor does he move. Christoph then orders Marlon to go over with a pack of beer, and tells him to go down to the basement to check on Truman. Marlon pulls the covers back on the bed, and it turns out it's an inflatable snowman with a noise recorder to imitate snoring. There's also a huge hole in the basement floor, and Truman is nowhere to be found. Christoph, not knowing what to do, does the unthinkable and cuts the transmission. The whole world is shocked that the transmission has been cut, and Christoph orders the entire staff on set to search for Truman. Christoph commands the sun to rise, to make the search easier, and when a thorough search of the land had been completed, he suggests searching the sea. As the cameras pan over the sea, they see Truman on a lone sailboat, sailing away. The transmission is turned on again, and Christoph orders one of the actors to go after Truman, but since they are all actors, nobody knows how to sail a boat, so none of them can go. With no other choice, Christoph simulates a storm to force Truman to go back to the island. However, Truman puts up a fight, and yells at the sky in defiance, "Is that the best you can do?" This makes Christoph angry, and he increases the wind and the turbulence, which nearly makes Truman fall overboard. Christoph finally gives in, knowing that Truman won't back down, and he turns off the weather simulation. Truman continues to sail, until his boat is rocked by a strong impact. Truman sees that his boat has collided with the sky wall, at end of the dome. He gets off his boat and examines the wall, then makes his way to a staircase leading to an exit door. As he is just about to walk through the door, Christoph talks to him over the intercom, for the first time in his entire life. Christoph tells Truman that he is the star of a reality TV show, called The Truman Show, and he tries to convince Truman to stay within his world, where he can live happily forever. Truman deliberates for a moment, and then he looks up at the sky, and says, "And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening and good night." He then takes a bow and leaves the dome. Sylvia jumps off the sofa, and runs out of her apartment, and the rest of the world cheers at the finale of The Truman Show. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.